Deli in West Haven, Connecticut. Thank you very much for joining us. This is our very first episode, and we are broadcasting live over Facebook as part of the University of New Haven's virtual Founders Day festivities as we celebrate our 100th birthday. I'm J.W. Stewart, and today with my co-host, University of New Haven Athletics Director Sheahon Zenger, we have a great lineup of guests today, including University of New Haven President Steve Kaplan and Deputy Provost Glenn McGee. That's our avatars, our caricatures, and yes, we thank our friends at Provenzano's Deli, but a 5-minute drive from our main campus in West Haven, Connecticut. Again, welcome to the Dr. Z and J.W podcast. I'm J.W. Stewart, joined by Sheahon Zenger. Sheahon, before we get going, some brief introductions, because even though we've done a couple of test runs with this podcast, this is the first time people are seeing and hearing and meeting us live. So just a real brief background about me. I grew up in Middletown, Rhode Island, which is right next to Newport. Went to school at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Worked in newspapers in New York. Worked in television in New York. I worked at ESPN for 12 years as a studio host and anchor. And then another 4 years at the NBC affiliate here in Connecticut as a sports anchor and reporter. These days, I'm in my second year as an adjunct professor at the University of New Haven. And I get a chance now to podcast, which is, I've never had a chance to do that before in my life. J.W. is my name, but it's so hard for people to say J.W. They get tongue-tied. That's why we go with J.W. But now we bring in the star of our show, and that's Dr. Z. Sheahon Zenger, again, our athletic director at UNH. Dr. Z, give Charger Nation a little bit of brief history about yourself.
Well, first of all, happy Founders Day, J.W. And
thank you.
We've done a few of these test runs, and we'll be rolling those out for people. And some have seen a sneak peek here and there, but we're really excited about going live today with President Kaplan, the real star of the show. And I appreciate you calling me that. I may just stop now and quit while I'm ahead. You know, just as your name is shortened to J-Dub, when you have a name like Sheahon, you go with Dr. Z or Coach Z or Z in a hurry. So that's why you see that on the screen. Much like you, been in this business for 30 years, started out as an assistant football coach for 1 year at a high school in Kansas called Manhattan High School. I grew up in the middle of western Kansas, halfway between Kansas City and Denver, about as far from the water as you can get. So I'm enjoying sitting here today in Branford. I'm making the transition from Branford to West Haven. But right now I'm looking out at the Long Island Sound, the Whitecaps. It's a stormy day, which is beautiful. So with that, from Manhattan High, I went to coach at Drake University, director of football operations for the legendary Bill Snyder at Kansas State, and I then moved around. Went to graduate school at the University of Kansas, back to coaching at South Florida, coaching at Wyoming, back to Kansas State as a fundraiser, and eventually the athletic director at Illinois State, Kansas, and now the University of New Haven.
So how many times have you moved in your life?
You know what? I was jotting down on a notepad the other day, just from birth to now, something like 15 to 20 times. I eliminated the chunk in my childhood where I spent growing up with my parents and brother and sister from 4 to 20. And I've moved about every 3 years if you averaged it out. So that's just the nature of being a football coach and an athletic administrator. But as an AD, I've stayed places 6 and 8 years and hopefully can do the same here at New Haven.
So you just moved your family from Kansas to Connecticut in the last week. What's that experience been like for you?
Well, there were multi-parts to that. I went back over a month ago, and North American Van Lines came and brought all the furniture, and I came behind it and got it moved in. And then under quarantine, I stayed here for a month by myself. Literally by myself. I wouldn't advise that, but thankfully I had a lot of Zoom calls, and President Kaplan helped me through that. And so I went back last week, met my family with the rest of the boxes and whatnot in a U-Haul, and I drove it 1,200 miles back here and landed in West Haven on Saturday. A beautiful day, and introduced them to the beach and Mike's Pizza, and now it's been unloading boxes for the last few days.
And how many boxes do you still have to unpack?
In my basement, I'm not exaggerating. I think there's about 200 left.
Wow.
That's why my wife chased me back to Brantford for this podcast.
Tell us really quick. Most people know you because you were the athletic director at Kansas for a long time. So I'm sure many people in Charger Nation who are watching and listening right now, how did you get from Kansas to here at Division II University of New Haven?
A search firm that President Kaplan and his staff hired reached out to me when I was at TCU working for the chancellor there. I'd left that part out. That was a brief 9-month, 10-month interim, and said, we got a challenge that I think is right up your alley. I showed up on August 15th to interview, and we'll talk about this when President Kaplan comes on. I never left. I mean that. I went home for Thanksgiving. He has an amazing way about himself. He can recruit with the best of them, and he hooked me.
Yeah, we can't wait to bring out President Kaplan. He'll be joining us about another 5 minutes or so as we celebrate Founders Day virtually here and UNH's 100th birthday. So, Sheahon, you've written some very moving letters on the front page of NewHavenChargers.com, and I would encourage all the UNH family and the Charger Nation to read them when they have an opportunity. And your most recent one was posted within the last day or so, and certainly talking about this podcast and this venture that we're embarking on. But you sign your letters in a unique way, which I've never seen before. You use 2 Latin words. Please tell us what those Latin words are, how to pronounce them, and what they mean.
Well, it's an ancient phrase, and I borrowed it. I borrowed it from antiquity, but I also borrowed it from Philip Rivers, the quarterback of the San Diego Chargers. I still call him San Diego. It's serendipity that he's the quarterback of the Chargers and we're the Chargers. But it came through Miles McPherson, who's probably our greatest football player ever here, that went on to play for the Chargers and is now the pastor of a super mega church out in San Diego. He was interviewing Philip Rivers in front of all these people. And another alum, Dave Peterson, sent me a copy of that video and said, hey, Shane, you need to look at minute 48 to minute 52. And lo and behold, Miles is asking Rivers about this phrase called Nunc Cepi that he uses in his life. And I've seen him doing commencements addressing this concept, et cetera. So Philip uses Nunc Cepi, which means now I begin. And a lot of other folks do around the world in think tanks and whatnot. It means now I begin. So he says, whether I throw a touchdown pass or an interception, I treat them the same. Rudyard Kipling had a poem to that end. But now I begin. If I fight with my wife, now I begin. If I yell at my kids, now I begin. So ironically, we start to incorporate this in our leadership team meetings. And then when we had a family meeting with all of our student athletes, we usually have between 350 and 400 of them to start the year. I put that at the end and said, folks, I'm going to challenge you. Your coaches came here, chose to come here. You chose to come here. I chose to come here. Let's embrace this concept together. Now we begin together. And the student athletes got into it, started chanting it. We say it to each other on campus. We have billboards in the buildings with it, and we have T-shirts with it. So I can't imagine a better time for that phrase to come to life than right now during this time we're living in. Now we begin.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's my next question. Nunc Cepi, how does that apply to what we're all going through in our lives, not only here at the University of New Haven, but for people around the world?
Well, I think we're all dealing with anxiety and stress and strain and so on and so forth. And the best answer I have for him is you just wake up every day and you start fresh again. I hope that President Kaplan will talk about that when he comes on here. He has certainly helped me with some issues he went through in the past, health-wise, that he just said he got through them one day at a time. And so every morning you wake up, it's a fresh day, and now we begin.
Yep. It's a great phrase, and it's made its way onto our social media sites as well with the hashtag Nunc Cepi. Mm-hmm. So it's become part of Charger Nation, which is great. Before we bring out President Kaplan here in another minute or so, Sheahon, I wanted you and me to kind of explain why we're doing this podcast, for the folks who are watching and listening here as part of the Charger Nation Network. We've talked about this for a little while, but I'm sure the question will come up, why now? Why are you doing this podcast now? Even though this is actually, this goes back to a meeting we had back in December. We thought that this would be a good way to kind of get our name out there. But why is it important, do you think, that we're doing this podcast now?
Well, I think there's 3 pieces to this, J.W. One is when I was hired, they asked me to take a lead in being external on behalf of the athletics department and the university, considering some background that I'd had. And number 2, I've always had an allergy to social media. I think that tweeting can be misinterpreted. I've watched friends of mine heavily engaged in it, and they get misinterpreted, and it can end up bad as much as it can be good. Well, I had other friends coaches and whatnot, some in the entertainment industry who'd gotten into podcasts. And I saw that as a way where you can truly be authentic. People get to see you. They get to see your body language, your facial expressions, your voice tone. And it's hard to be misinterpreted through a podcast. And so with that, I let you and Rob Thompson and John Mays and several others on campus say, I think this is the forum to get the message out about the University of New Haven athletics, the University of New Haven, and the surrounding area, and also to bring in guests from the university that we can highlight, as well as around the region and the nation, that folks both in and outside the UNH family, I believe, will embrace and want to listen to.
Yeah, I think this is a great vehicle for us to get the positive messages out of for all the great things that are going on at UNH, not only athletics, but on the academic side as well, and a good way to keep connected, especially during this time in our world's history, to be able to be connected with the UNH family and the Charger Nation, current students, student athletes, and prospective students and student athletes. And for our very first guest, for our very first live show, we went right to the top. And fortunately, he had time to join us today. So, Dr. Z, I'll let you do the honors here with the introduction.
Well, I shared with you earlier that I came here on August the 15th to kick the tires, and I met President Kaplan for the first time, and I could just tell halfway through the interview, in a group interview, there's a real connection with this president. And we went into a room afterwards and had a fireside chat, and he hooked me. And part of it was he asked me if he offered the opportunity to teach a literature class with him. We both have a background in that. His is much more extensive than mine. So I got to ride sidecar with him in an honors literature class this fall and see him in his true calling. And that was something really for me, a real joy. So I could go on and on about him, but I'll say this. He's taken this university over the last 16 years from an enrollment of 2,000 to nearly 7,000 and changed the look of the campus. I think our alums that are watching this know exactly what I'm talking about. What he's done with residence life, what he's done with academics, and now what he's trying to help us do with athletics is nothing short of phenomenal. And with that, I'll back up and let the real star, our leader, President Kaplan, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. J.W., thanks for inviting me. And Shane, thanks for doing this podcast. You said you can go on, and you were doing a great job, so maybe I should just let you go on and on. I can't praise myself like you did.
Yeah, I did. I only got fourth of the way through it. There's all kinds of stuff on there. We can keep going.
You can be my press agent, Shane.
So President Kaplan, we've heard Dr. Z's side of the story of how he ended up at UNH. I want to hear your side of the story.
Happy to tell you. And I'm going to do so like Shane, by way of another story. So years ago, when I was a department chair of a Department of English and Foreign Languages, reviewing resumes for a hire in Spanish, and it was a very important hire. And I remember I was lying on our couch in the living room going through hundreds of resumes. And all of a sudden I turned to my wife and I said, I just found our person. Now this was a position in Spanish at a school that was 40% Hispanic. And so you would think logically I would be excited about an Hispanic candidate. And there were several, but the one that jumped out at me was a guy who had been at Yale. He was Caucasian. He had run the Hispanic Student Union at Yale as a Caucasian. He wrote one of the most important PhDs that became one of the most important books on Cervantes' Don Quixote. Went on to teach at Mount Holyoke, one of the best private schools in the country. And just before he got tenure, he left there, went to Los Angeles, and with his brother opened a mariachi band in a Mexican restaurant, club, bar type facility, and spent 10 years doing that. And I looked at this guy's resume and I said, there's no way we would normally get someone with these credentials. This guy's one of the best in the country. And clearly, under the circumstances he's looking for a new start, something different to do, something rewarding. He chose us and we chose him. Very similar to what happened to Shane. I'm going through the resumes and I looked at Shane's resume and I said, you must be kidding. This guy is interested in coming here, that someone of this caliber is interested in moving from D1 to D2 to help us get to D1. And from there, among a great pool of candidates, there was only one person I knew we had to hire, and that was Sheahon Zenger. He's got obviously nationally recognized credentials. He's got an incredible personality, as you're all seeing. He's passionate about his work. And more importantly, and probably most importantly, he's an idealist. And that's why he chose us, because he looked and he said, here's a place I can make a difference. And he's been making a difference ever since.
Now, as President Kaplan, as Sheahon tells the story, he got there and he's never left. It was that the whole first week, you guys were just going out and having food. Is that right?
He found my sweet spot. You know, I'm a little bit of a foodie, and he kept recommending, hey, if you stay another day, we can go here and go there. And before you know it, I was hooked.
Shane's like me. You know, both of us can play golf. People always ask me why I don't play golf, and I say because it takes too much time. And then they say, well, you can raise money on the golf course. And I always say, but I can raise money in a restaurant, and it's just as enjoyable and it's faster. So the two of us spent quite a bit of time. I gave him a grand tour of the restaurants, and now when he walks into any restaurant in the area, they all know him by first name.
You know, that's not far from the truth. My wife came to visit a few times before this permanent move, and the second time we'd gone to the G Cafe, which is one of President Kaplan and my favorites, and we'd been to a place called Lenny's the night before, which I notoriously spent way too much time at. And she goes, people around here seem to know you. Well, I guess I'm not staying at home heating up ramen noodles, but yeah, she kind of caught me. But it's President Kaplan's fault.
Well, we're glad that you're here, Sheahon, you know, as one of the newest members of the UNH family, and I am as well. We're still learning about some of the traditions here that go back, in our case, 100 years. President Kaplan, we should say Happy Founders Day to you. Absolutely. But for the people who may not know or may have forgotten their history from the time that they were at school, remind us all, what is Founders Day?
So Founders Day is the celebration of the day the University of New Haven was established 100 years ago. And we're celebrating it today, as we have over the last few years, on the day of the founding, but 100 years later, which is something we're very proud of, very excited about, and hope all of you are as well.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be celebrating Founders Day on its centennial year? Founders Day is special all the time, but what does it mean to be celebrating it here on birthday number 100?
So in particular, it's a moment to reflect. I guess the analogy would be in a marriage, you have an anniversary every year, but there are certain milestones where you stop and you look back and you reflect on what you've accomplished and what the relationship in the case of a marriage has meant to you and your spouse and your family and so forth. You know, at this point in time, we've been building up to this by reflecting a lot on who we are and what we mean to the broader community and to our graduates, but then simultaneously looking at where we're heading. And I think a 100th anniversary is a chance to look back and say, we're sustainable, right? We've made it. I was thinking recently about the 100th anniversary of the university. When I was in Virginia, I was the chancellor of the only branch campus of the University of Virginia. We had a football donor, Lee Maud Richmond, and I once asked her how long she had been. I asked her if she started watching football, attending football games. She was a fanatic in her childhood. And she said, oh, no. I didn't start watching football games until probably about 80 years ago. So Lee Maud was 98, not long before she passed away. And we had a birthday party for her. She wanted to make it to 100. And as she cut the cake, I asked her to make a wish. And she looked at me and she said, what do I do? What do I wish for at 98? And I said, ideally for another 98 years that have been as good as the ones we've had. So, as we sit here on our 100th anniversary, we're hoping for another incredibly powerful and meaningful 100 years ahead of us.
I may be stealing one of J.W's questions here, but in the 16 years you've been here, what are 2 or 3 of your favorite memories about the institution and the transitions that you've seen ushered in?
Of the stories I can tell.
Yeah. I've heard some of the others. Yeah.
As long as I still want to be employed.
Yeah.
I'd have to say probably a couple of the most memorable, and one in particular was, I knew we needed a recreation center. Our students were working out literally in a closet. It was a room that was the size of a walk-in closet. with 2 treadmills, a crummy old TV, and the treadmills weren't much better. And it was dark and dingy. And I said, we need to build a recreation center. We didn't have the money. I hired the architects, as Sheahon knows, before we even had the funds to build it. But I said, we're going to do this and we'll find the money. And we did, and we built it. And that day that it was opening, I was off campus with someone, with a donor, at lunch. And on the way back to campus, as that person was about to get into his car, I said, you know what? I haven't been in the new building since it opened. Let's go over there. So around 2 p.m, weekday, school day. And we walked in and the building was packed. And I looked at this guy and I said, this is eerie. And he said, why? And I said, look at them. I said, you would have thought that this building, or you would think that this building had been here for the last 10 years. The second that door opened, the students flooded in, jumped on the equipment, started working out. It was clear to me that we were on the right track at that point in time. Because people had said to me, are you sure our student body will use this? And I said, this isn't being built for our current student body. It's being built for the future of the university, for the kind of students that we want and need to have here. And we had them, we found out. Similarly, if I think of another important milestone, it was when we opened the campus in Prado. I was there. I had been invited by another university president, a retired college president, to do a joint venture. I checked it out. I saw the facility they were talking about renting. I turned to him and his investor and I said, you don't want to do this, because if you do, as a for-profit, you're going to be subject to the Italian value-added tax, which will simply consume any profit you could have. I said, so if you're willing to step aside, I'll give you a finder's fee. We're going to take this over. I turned to the city representative who was at the table and I said, if you can get this done in the next 6 weeks, we'll give you, the city, something to make it happen. I don't mean this is a bribe, but an incentive. 6 weeks later, we had the campus. We closed the deal. And I went back that fall to visit with the students who were there. Same thing as with the recreation center. All I could think of is, why hadn't we done this sooner? And now that we've done it, it's become a really important part of our DNA. We need a place where our students can study abroad, step out of their comfort zone, and learn more about themselves and the world. So, you know, the real memorable moments for me have always involved students and seeing that we, and I personally, are having a positive impact on shaping them, and through them, shaping the future for all of us.
You know, I think that's one of the advantages of being in higher education. You know, visionaries and leaders in other fields can come up with an idea and eventually see it through. But in higher education, you get to see students show up. And by the way, the rec center is gorgeous for those who haven't seen it, and it continues to be full to this day. And Prado, you had a vision and idea, and then you get to see real people inhabit that vision one day.
Yeah, I'll tell you another one of my favorite stories that embodies why the University of New Haven needs to exist and what kind of difference we make in the world. About 10 years ago, one of our criminal justice majors went along on a study abroad tour, 2 weeks, to France. Faculty member hosted it. He had students from across the campus, and they were standing on a hillside above the beach at Normandy, at Omaha Beach, where the D-Day invasion had, of course, taken place. The professor was looking down at the ocean, as were the students, pointing out various spots. It was incredibly stormy. There were 6, 7, and even 8-foot waves. And all of a sudden, one of the students, he was about 6'2", the criminal justice major, stripped down to his underwear and went racing into the raging sea, literally at risk of his own life. What he had seen was that 2 young parents were on the beach screaming for help, and their 2 young children, ages 10 and 12, young boy and his sister, were drowning. And no one was ready to risk to go out there to save them. This young man, by the time he got to the 2 young people, the boy was unconscious, the girl was close. He, again, at peril of his own life, swam back to shore and saved both of them.
Wow.
And I always say, no matter what, he made an enormous difference as a University of New Haven student. He had been trained in saving people's lives as a criminal justice major in self-sacrifice. But in addition to saving their lives, for all we know, he saved all of our lives. It could be that one of those students right now is working in a lab that comes up with a cure or a vaccine for this horrible virus. So, every student we train and prepare makes a difference in the world. And because of our emphasis on public safety, engineering, other fields like that, health sciences, we mean a lot to society and to the broader world. And that young man is just one, obviously, of thousands and thousands of examples.
That's incredible. What a story.
Yeah, that's well said, President Kaplan. And certainly it's a great way to sum up the type of high character students, and not just the students, but all employees, I think, at the University of New Haven. I just want to follow up. You brought it up, the coronavirus. We're celebrating this 100th Founders Day safely, virtually at home. It's a Founders Day unlike any other. What updates can you give us on UNH, the coronavirus, and what lies ahead for us?
So I'm glad you asked that question instead of what are the plans for the next 100 years, because right now I'm focused on the next 100 days. And we've got several contingency planning groups with some of our best and brightest employees working feverishly to make sure that as we go through this incredibly unprecedented crisis, we're prepared for every possible scenario, as much as that's, of course, humanly possible. So our plan is to reopen in August, and probably earlier in August than planned, for various groups, students that need labs, students that need clinical access, possibly athletes. We're looking at making sure that when we open, we can provide as close to the experience students are expecting as possible, recognizing that we won't be able to replicate what we did last summer when we reopened. We'll certainly be limited in how many students can be on campus and how they can interact. So we're planning around that. We want to make sure that if it's a limited number of students, we provide them with an incredibly rich experience, as we always do. We're planning for contingencies if we have to go back online like we are now, that we can do so as well as we're doing it now at an even higher level. We're looking at everything it's going to take until things get back to normal. And as I keep saying, that's not getting back to normal of 3 months ago. It's getting back to a new normal. And what that'll mean for the university, if we do this right, is a new normal that's even better than where we were a few months ago. We don't plan on getting high. We plan on excelling as we get through this process.
President Kaplan, you and I have talked about this multiple times, and I referenced Dave Peterson earlier in the podcast, our one of our football alums who's done so well out there. And when this pandemic first occurred, he talked to me about your leadership over the last 15, 16 years and the entire history in his lifetime of UNH, and that we're overcomers. We have a certain amount of grit to us, and that's the type of student we have. And kind of seeing this as the lack of a better word, an opportunity for a school like ours to do that, show that once again. And I kind of hand that off to you as to your perspective on that.
Yeah, very much so. You really captured it. We would make this our slogan because it can be misconstrued, but we've always been a second chance university. And some of our, in fact, almost all of our really successful graduates were second chance people. They came to us for an opportunity that had been denied for various reasons elsewhere, and they excelled. Those are people that have an incredible amount of persistence and a work ethic that's second to none. They're the ones that are going to help us get through this. And that applies to the employees and to the current student body. We attract people to work here who, like you, Sheahon, are idealists. I would count myself among them, that believe that making the world a better place is why you get up in the morning.
Yeah.
So our alums, our donors, our faculty, staff, and our students will help us get through this and reach new heights.
We talk a lot about leadership on this podcast, and especially leadership in crisis. And the classes that I teach, President Kaplan, all the students have given you high marks for your leadership during this time of crisis. They say that you communicate with compassion, with empathy, and that you do just a great job of communicating to them, and that you really care about them. What type of a feedback have you received from students or anyone on campus about your leadership during this time?
I'm very proud to say that it's pretty much what you just described. They've been grateful that we're communicating extensively and honestly. I had a town hall meeting with the staff this morning, and I was asked some difficult questions. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I'm being very direct. I think it'd be irresponsible to be anything but. And, you know, I use an expression in the town hall meeting. I don't know if I conveyed it properly, but people that are worried about where we are should worry, because if that's all they're doing, they're going to face some problems, right? In other words, if an employee is worried about, is the university going to make it? They might not make it. What we need are people that aren't worried, but that are driven, right? That get it, that getting out of this. And that gets back to what Sheahon said about one day at a time. You know, I had throat cancer 5 years ago, and it's documentable that it's by far one of the most brutal treatments for any cancer. I mean, I would have to go, excuse me, I would have to stay away from my family. My daughter and her husband and her then 3-year-old grandson were staying with us, and I didn't want them to see what I was going through. And I could only drink a liquid diet. I never drank it in front of them. I'd go into my bedroom and I'd go into the bathroom and I would chug-a-lug one of these just to get my nutrition. And the second I was done, I would slam my hand against the door frame just to release some of the pain. And then I'd get back in bed and start reading again. And eventually I'd go out for my daily walk. And Sheahon, like me, I'm a daily exerciser. I would maybe not walk as fast as I did, but I would keep pushing. And I got through it damn well, frankly, and I recovered, thankfully, pretty darn well. You take it, as Sheahon said, as I've said to him, one day at a time. But that doesn't mean you spend that day waiting. You spend that day engaged and acting and focused on what it's going to take to get through the next day. And that's what we need right now. We need people that are willing to confront the truth and then rise to the occasion and do what needs to get done. And that includes our students. So I've not sugarcoated with them that we're facing a really challenging year, both fiscally and educationally. We're not going to be able to give them everything we want. All I can promise them is we'll try damn hard to get close to it.
You know, J.W., I've said this to some close friends, and I've said it to President Kaplan. I'm fortunate. I've gotten to work with some of the best and brightest in higher education and athletics over the last 30 years. And I was taught by the man that I consider my second father, Bill Snyder, the legendary football coach at Kansas State. And I've waited almost 30 years to find someone like him. And it's President Kaplan. And what he just described, the one day at a time, the relentlessness, the tenacity of pursuing goals and just going after it day after day after day, is what helped Bill Snyder create what they call the greatest turnaround in the history of college football. Well, I'm not making light of that at all, but in light of what we are facing now and the future of higher education and the university, this is far more important. And to be working with someone of President Kaplan's caliber who takes that approach one day at a time, relentlessness. What I can say that he can't is, I don't know when he sleeps. There are emails that will come through at midnight and 3:30 in the morning and 5 in the morning, and it's always about UNH and about where we're going and what we're doing. Now, having said that, President Kaplan, I want to ask you, the one day at a time piece helped me so much. You also, in light of what you said about worrying, you told me a story about a movie you saw once that I think it was Tom Hanks. I have not seen it. There's a line in there that's been equally as helpful to me.
Yeah, thanks for the compliment and for the comparison with Bill Schneider. Don't ever let me coach a football team, though.
Well, you probably didn't want to run a university, so you're.
I always thought Get That Quarterback was some guy that was really cheap and just wanted to make more money. So yeah, the movie was, and it's something that when I saw the movie, I was already living by it, and it just reinforced the way it was delivered in the movie. Really got my attention. I think it's called The Bridge of Spies, and Tom Hanks is an attorney in the 50s defending a Russian spy, and there are two scenes where this guy is close to being put to death. One is in a courtroom where he's about to be sentenced for espionage, which was punishable with the death penalty. And at the end of the movie, he's being handed back over to the Russians, who will most likely kill him for treason on the other side. And both times, Tom Hanks has become really fond of this guy, who's not your typical spy, but is just a very unique, kind, compassionate person. Both times that he's close to the death penalty, Tom Hanks turns to him and he says, "Aren't you worried?" And the guy very calmly says, "Will it help?" And that's exactly how I feel about what we're in right now. Is if you're worried about it, you should worry, because that's what you're going to spend your time doing. You got to roll up your sleeves and go for it. And in the 16 years I've been here, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I hope one of them wasn't that I thought too much about things and didn't just do something just to make sure that something got done. And right now, we're doing a lot of thinking and a lot of planning, but in many instances, you got to just pull the trigger and hope you pull the right one, right?
Yep.
Well, Dr. Kaplan, because so many people who are watching and listening to this podcast are not only fans of the university itself, but fans of our athletic department, I know that they're going to have a question, so I'll bring it up. I mean, it's the reason you brought Dr. Z on board. Certainly things might be delayed because of the coronavirus, but still, I'm curious, what is the shared vision you and Dr. Z have for the future of athletics at the University of New Haven?
So I'll give a quick answer, and then I'll let Sheahon give maybe a little bit more detailed answer. I constantly misquoting a line from the author Hunter S. Thompson, who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's apparently not the quote, but I like it, so I'll just keep using it. I've been asked about the move to Division I, and we hired Sheahon to get us there, by faculty, by staff, are we still going to do this? And I said, now more than ever, right? When the going gets tough, you got to get moving, and you can't sit and debate and analyze things to death as we tend to do in higher education. So, I've asked Sheahon to fast track the move, and that's what we're doing, and to expand athletics, which is what he's done miraculously just in the short time he's been here. So, Sheahon, I'll let you piggyback on that.
Well, that was part of the hook when I went from the meeting with the search committee to the other room with President Kaplan for a fireside chat, was that shared vision and that kind of mentality and that leadership. And I committed to him at the time that I would follow him and the board in their direction. I'm a lifelong lover of higher education. Both my parents were faculty members, and when I told my dad I wanted to be a college football coach, he said that yeah, that's fine, you can do that as long as you get a PhD. You pick what it's going to be in. But he told me that I was 9, and we followed through with that. I only share that with you to say we're on track to do this. We'll find any way we can that benefits the university, and that's really what I've pledged from day one. I believe at this level, this niche we're looking at, which is called FCS Division I, it really is largely enrollment driven and lifts up the institution from that direction. We're not talking about the Power Five. We're not talking about exorbitant amounts of money on that end. It's more about opportunities for more and more students on campus to participate in college athletics and enhance your entire student body and the experience of the other students who get to come participate as fans and band members and cheerleaders and dancers and all the things that go around it, the pageantry of college athletics. I've said from the day I got here, I believe FCS, Division I athletics, is the sweet spot of college athletics. And we're right on the cusp of it right now. I believe UNH, Charger Nation, does Division II better than anyone. And we're right there, just as some of our close peers have made that jump in the last few years, that we are ready and able to follow in their footsteps.
And, J.W., one of the thoughts or slogans or whatever phrases that you want to, phrases that has guided my presidency comes from the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Every time someone asks me why I'm doing something, whether it was, the program we opened in Big Data in San Francisco, or the campus in Italy, or now Division I athletics, I think of the scene when every time Robert Redford and Paul Newman are being chased by a posse throughout the movie, same posse, each time they turn around and they say, who are those guys? Well, I want people to constantly be asking about us, who are those guys? What? That's why I was thrilled that we could hire Sheahon, and I know he'll get us where we need to go. And so the people will be saying, who is that guy? And what is he done here?
So between the two of you, who's Butch and who's Sundance?
Who's the one that gets Catherine Ross? I'm going to be the one that gets Catherine Ross. I think that's Robert Redford.
You can't go wrong either way. Either you're Robert Redford or Paul Newman. That's the win in my book. I think that's a great note to end on. I know we have our Deputy Provost, Glenn McGee, waiting in the wings. President Kaplan, happy Founders Day. Thank you very much for everything that you have done for the University of New Haven in your time as president. And thank you for everything you're doing for us during this time of crisis and your leadership. And thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon on campus when we're all back together. It's been great to meet you virtually. I look forward to meeting you in person. And I know Dr. Z is such a big fan, and it's easy to see why. I'm a big fan of yours as well now that I've had a chance to see you and talk to you. So thank you for everything. And we're glad you've joined us here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. Thanks,
J.W., for your kind words. Thanks for hosting this. And I'm with you. Let's get back on campus and meet in person. Take care.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We look forward to seeing you soon. All right, before we bring out our next guest, Dr. Z and I would like to recognize our title sponsor. That's Provenzano's Deli, which is located on Sawmill Road, about a 5-minute drive from our main campus in West Haven. Provenzano's is a family-owned and operated deli that's been serving Charger Nation since 2013. They have the best subs around. In fact, I have it on very good authority. Dr. Z is a big fan of their signature chicken cutlet. When you're hungry, think Provenzano's first. And we thank the Provenzano's family for being part of our Charger family. I've actually not had a chance to go to Provenzano's, Dr. Z. I think you've probably been there a few times.
I've been there way too often. They have a drive-by that I've been making use of. And as I told you, my wife and son just got here on Saturday. And I believe it was Sunday afternoon when my son asked, Dad, do I get to go to Provenzano's? So I took him there and got him his just to whet his taste buds, your typical, chicken Parmesan. But my favorite's the Napoli, which is broccoli rabe. For those who aren't from the Northeast, that's an acquired taste. It's, broccolini and chopped up Italian sausage with extra garlic and provolone. And I'm drooling as I talk about it right now.
Also the nickname of our producer, Rob Thompson, Broccoli Rob. Hey, Sheahon, before we get to our next guest, Glenn McGee, we have a Facebook Live question that comes to us from Rob Hollop, who is our lacrosse coach, also works in our admissions office. And Rob wants to know, what sports movie have you watched during quarantine?
Wow, dang, Rob. Wait, thanks for throwing that out there. In full disclosure, I've been watching a lot of comedies, and I live off of sitcoms. I don't always sleep real well at night. And my wife's remembering this now that we're together again. She asked me to turn off the TV last night, and I said, well, can we just watch Frasier? I found a channel that has Frasier all night long. And so I just leave it on there. When I wake up, I watch Frasier over and over and over. Although my favorite sitcom is Everybody Loves Raymond and The King of Queens, but I can't find them that last all night. So here's my real answer to Rob. What my wife and my youngest son, Jake, and I watched 2 nights ago all night long was the documentary about the Bulls. And I've been a Bulls fan, lived in Illinois for 6 years at the Illinois State University. And one of my close friends is Doug Collins, who's featured in that as I think the coach that put Michael Jordan on his path. And it's well documented in there. And so that's been a true pleasure. I'm rewatching them. I've watched several episodes several times. And I think they released the next episode Sunday night, if I'm not mistaken. And
yep, 2 more on Sunday. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's fascinating in this time how we're all watching the same thing, kind of like back when we only had 2 or 3 channels on our TV. People keep talking about those days with the Bulls, and if they weren't heroes before, they're becoming heroes again to a whole nother generation.
Absolutely, right. They're right. The younger generation who's only heard about Michael Jordan, never seen him play, now get a chance to see it through that called The Last Dance. I actually have it on my DVR. Haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I hear it's phenomenal. All right, let's bring out our next guest, and that's Deputy Provost Glenn McGee. And Glenn, also a big sports fan as well. He's gone to some big time schools for undergraduate and graduate and doctoral work, and we look forward to speaking with him here once we bring him out. I think Glenn's stuck in the green room in the back, might be having too many snacks. There he is. Glenn, I hope we've treated you okay in the green room back there.
It was great. We had refreshments. It was just awesome, let me tell
you. J.W., I've gotten to know Glenn pretty well over the past 9 months, and actually moved into a house around the corner from him and his wife, Summer. They're part of what lured me into the West Shore of West Haven. and all the fun that goes on up and down Ocean View Avenue. For the alums that are watching this, I know you know what I mean. All the way from Stowe's all the way down to what I call Florida, which is the beach in Milford where some of the football players lived when they were in college. I can't fathom living on the beach in Milford when you're going to college, but they pulled it off. I think Rob Thompson was one of those. But as I look at Glenn, you know, when I first met him in summer and we'd gone to dinner and whatnot, and they described, you know, Summers, the Dean of Health Sciences, and Glenn's our Deputy Provost. They're both bioethicists. I'm not sure I could say that a few months ago, much less spell it or knew what it was. But all of a sudden, in this day and age, that's an incredibly important background to have. And Glenn has been a key factor in helping us navigate what's currently going on. And the reason we asked him to come in here and follow up our leader, President Kaplan, is that he could fill in some holes for our alums. And I think that's obvious to see why we all follow President Kaplan in his dynamic personality. And so, Glenn, as we slide in behind that, you know, I've seen you do a presentation on all the reasons why people, students, faculty, staff, and alumni ought to feel good about the university that President Kaplan and his staff have built over the last 16 years.
I'm with you. It's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you know, Founders Day in a lot of institutions, if it happened in 2020, and you look around and there are all these things going wrong and so on, you'd say, gosh, we better reschedule. It's rain out, right? It's not like that here. This is another demonstration of an institution that thrives on helping people solve important social problems. And, you know, I'm a bioethics person by training. So, you know, it's the Full Employment Act out there for people who do what I do with all these different problems and so on. But like one of the things, like you, I'll tell you, coming to this institution for me was fundamentally about the dream that Steve Kaplan has put to work in these last 16, 17 years here, as this institution has grown and grown, but at the same time has become internationally renowned for training people who love leadership, who want problems like this to solve. Of course, nobody would want a plague in our time, but they really thrive on the competitive need, not only to succeed, but to help others and bring others along. And it's a blast. I mean, yeah, and it's nice there's a beach, right? And great food and good people and a community and so on. But, you know, like you, I was electrified by the fact that this is a place where a group of people really got together to work toward a unique university. And we're seeing that right now. I'm thrilled, frankly, that we have found, ahead of all our competitive universities around us, a way to maximize our impact for our students and alumni by pointing out what it means to serve.
Well, we talked about with President Kaplan that Founders Day is a great time to kind of reminisce, especially here on our 100th birthday. Glenn, how are we positioned for the immediate future? Because it's also important to look ahead. How are we positioned for the immediate future? And I know Dr. Kaplan, he's looking like 100 days out, never mind 100 years. So that question's going to fall to you. Number one, how are we positioned for the immediate future? And what's the future for UNH 100 years from now, do you think?
Well, I'm not touching 100 years from now. You know, very, very attractive robots floating around doing something or another, you know, who knows? But I will say, beyond the 100 days, one of the things, again, that's been phenomenal in the last few days to watch happen here is people are talking here about the ways that our institution can transform not only itself, but also all of the different ways in which higher education can find opportunity. I mean, this is a time, frankly, to about whether or not all the things we do on the ground can be brought into the virtual, right? People need the camaraderie that they get in college. They need the intimacy that they find in college. They need their friendships and so on. And, you know, we're not going to settle for an online educational experience with a little square box like this one. We're not going to settle for just whatever we can squeeze into Zoom. We need more, right? It's just in the blood of this institution that we long for and we succeed at giving people a way to bring things together. So, I mean, I don't know what will happen next year. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty confident. President Kaplan asked me to bring together a group of folks from other places to talk about some of the opportunities we might have. And I've been struck by the degree to which our institution can pivot. We can find ways, new opportunities for our students to use new technologies, for example, to use, you know, artificial intelligence to help us to think creatively about the ways that the institution can train people in new ways. We find ways, for example, to train people to help in this epidemic and pandemic help others that they might not have thought about.
So, J.W., each of the last two nights and again tonight, Glenn has followed through on that charge from President Kaplan and brought together 6 experts from across the nation, a variety of fields, but a good half of them are what's described as futurists. And I'll admit, my brain was about to explode last night listening to these individuals. I'm not sure I understood about half of what they were talking about. But being an old English teacher myself and having read and taught Brave New World multiple times, I thought I was watching it last night. And, some of these individuals, the gentleman with the long beard who had written the book on academia and the future of it, blew my mind. So that's just something to note as to what you and President Kaplan are working on. But I want to spin this back to you for some of the time we have left here. You have sold me on some of the numbers that help illustrate how far UNH has come. And ranking,
I love that story.
It's a 1-minute synopsis of your sales pitch.
This is one of the things that very rarely does it happen. I think even in sports, actually, that think about it as a metaphor, that you get to hire the whole team at once, right? You could do real Moneyball and just go out and pick every single player. We've had that here. President Kaplan has hired more than 80% of the faculty at this university in the last 5 or 8 years. And so we're a very, very nimble institution. And in particular, frankly, we do something that most other institutions wouldn't even dream of, which is we focus on doing our research with our students. So students who come here all have an opportunity to work with 1 or 2 or 10 faculty on interesting research. And, you'd think maybe that would set us back. Like we wouldn't be able to work on, looking at atoms in a different way. It doesn't. In fact, we're actually among the top 5 institutions in our entire U.S. News category, among all the institutions in the North that are anything like our size in the research we put out. And the way they measure that, which sounds kind of boring, but really isn't, is reputation, right? It's how much of the work that you do gets cited by others. People talk about the University of New Haven. I mean, and that's true in so many ways, right? You turn on the TV in a time of crisis, there's someone there from the University of New Haven. But it's a transformative experience we've had here in terms of academia, because we've got faculty and students working together to make a fabulous impact, frankly, on the face of academia. And we do it in a way that students can take home. You can tell I'm having a blast here. Just like you, it's because Steve Kaplan makes that possible.
Yeah. I as you can tell, this episode, even though it's our live kickoff, J.W., is less about athletics than anything else. This is about the university. And I want to restate that over and over. In the future, when you tune in, there'll be a little more about athletics, but not today. But I will say this, in light of what Glenn just shared, my staff and I get to be guest lecturers in sports management classes. One of them's yours, J.W. And what we've done since then is invite those young people for hands-on experience. It was already happening before I got here, and we've doubled down on it. We can't function as an athletic department. We can't host football games and basketball games and baseball games without the student workers. And so you come to a place like the University of New Haven, you go take your classes where you learn this, that, and the other thing, but you can put on your resume that you were part of game day management, or you were part of academic support, or you were part of fundraising, whatever it may be. It is hands-on. I've never seen anything like it. And we trust them. And when they do a little bit well, we give them a little more. And by the time they're ready to go, they're ready to fly and go to work for somebody else that has a name that they want to work for. But this is where it started.
Well, it's a great, I think that's well said. And I think, Glenn, you certainly agree. I mean, that's what it's all about in the real world. Employers want people who are trained, ready to come out of college, hands-on experience. And here at the University of New Haven, we do that. We've done that for a long time, and we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, we're enthusiastic about it. We love what we're doing. I've been at other universities. I've had a lot of fun in my career, but this is a place where, as Dr. Z said, it's just special, right? Because it attracts people who jump in all the way and get busy. And I think one of the things that, again, sets us apart is that when we talk to prospective students about coming to this university, the stories we tell are stories about students who do phenomenal things, and they get inspired when they get here by leaders like you. And it's been amazing to watch the transformation, not only in athletics, but in the meaning of the institution since you've come.
We have a little less than 5 minutes left, but I wanted to ask Glenn this before we sign off. Glenn, you and your wife Summer both work for the University of New Haven. Both of you guys are avid pinball players. Tell us about that.
That's true. Well, I can't run. I can't catch a ball. I mean, what are we going to do? I don't remember actually how it happened. I think one day we were, someplace where there was a pinball machine. I'm actually a tiny bit too young for the real, pinball wizard days. But it turns out, believe it or not, that pinball is a giant sort of pseudo sport among hipsters. So these, ancient pinball machines have become, they then dive into it as an engineering problem. There's a pinball machine for just about anything. We've got one. It's a Hobbit pinball machine, and you can see the parts of the movie running around in the background. But it is frankly a lot of fun, and you make good friends in the pinball world. There's an annual tournament for pinball called Pinburg in Pittsburgh, where there's something like 2,000 pinball machines. And it may not sound like fun, but pinball is a blast. And Summer's actually, of course, she's literally the most competitive person I know. Summer's ranked nationally in pinball and just kills me. So I try to play when she's not around.
So before we were social distancing, I told you I live around the corner from the McGees, and I have to slide this in. It was on the night that the Chiefs, my hometown team, won the Super Bowl. I waited 40 years for that, but we got it, or 50, one of those, 50 actually. Glenn invited me to play the Hobbit pinball machine, and I think he just wanted to humble me after the Chiefs won before I went home, because he's pretty good at it and I'm not. I was that kid who got to go to the skating rink like twice a year, and the guys who got to go once a week got really good at things like that, and foosball and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, you got to have a hobby, or at least that's what my wife tells me.
So Glenn, you're okay, but Summer is the pinball wizard, right? That's the obligatory Who reference. I got to get that in.
She is. I stayed down. We've got our house. We have 3 floors, and she's up on the 3rd doing her stuff, and I'm down on the 1st. So I managed to land the floor with the pinball machine. And every now and then, when I turn off the camera, I'm hitting the flippers.
Well, Glenn, we thank you very much for joining the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. It's great to have you on here. I'm glad that you were able to join us here on Founders Day. We're all celebrating virtually, of course, and it's great to see you, great to talk to you, and we look forward to seeing you and everyone else back on campus again real soon.
Yeah, congratulations. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Dr. Z, you and I have a couple of minutes to recap things here before we sign off. What stood out to you today in our conversation with President Kaplan?
Just his continued enthusiasm and passion for the institution. Here's a man that has been here 16 years and gets a majority of the credit, the lion's share of the credit for what this institution's become. And he's not done with it. He wants to see this place get better and better and better, and he wants to usher it through this tough time that we're all going through as a country, as a state, as a world. And I think that's what I take away. We're lucky to have someone with that force of personality leading us in this tough time.
So when this is all over and we can all be together again, and there's no more the physical distancing, who's hosting the party, you or President Kaplan? Whose house is going to be the party house?
It depends what you want to be. If you want to be over here in Branford on what I call the seashore, it's his. If you want to be over in West Haven on the party beach, it's mine. It's
we look forward to better days ahead. That's for sure. It was great to be with you as always, Dr. Z. It was great to do this live here over Facebook. We've done a couple of trials that we'll be releasing over the weekend. And of course, we'll keep the Charger Nation and our Charger family up to date on things with everything that's going on at UNH. Again, as you said, not just athletics, but everything that's going on at the school via not only Facebook Live, but all of our social media accounts, which leads me to ask you, are you going to be on social media now? Are you going to have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram? Are you going whole hog into this thing?
You're just slowly pulling me in. This podcast has been a lot of fun the last couple of weeks. I don't know if I can take the full bite of the apple. You'll know that I just jumped right off the cliff and went all the way in.
I've been on Facebook and Twitter for a while. I actually just signed into Instagram the other day. First time ever doing that. So That's a new step for me. Normally, like you, I keep a relatively low profile on social media, but I think with this podcast, Dr. Z, that's out the window now.
Yeah. We went right past all that to the world of podcasting.
Yep. Well, Dr. Z, happy Founders Day to you, Nung Chepi as well. This is always so much fun, and we look forward to doing this again real soon.
All right. Nung Chepi, J.W.
Nung Chepi. Well, thanks to President Kaplan and Deputy Provost Glenn McGee for joining us today as we celebrate Founders Day and UNH's 100th birthday. Thanks also to our sponsor, Provenzano's Deli in West Haven, and thanks to everyone in Charger Nation who tuned in today. Please follow us on social media and stay up to date on when our new episodes will launch starting this weekend. For Dr. Z, producer of Broccoli Rob Thompson, and executive producer John Mays, I'm J.W. Stewart. Thanks for watching and listening. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time, Charger Nation.